Welcome. Welcome to our webcast today on the Global Leadership Forecast. I'm very excited to be bringing you this topic today. I'm Amy Abel. I'm Managing Director here at the Conference Board, and I'm delighted you've chosen to take your time to join us. We have a terrific topic with a terrific guest with me, and I think we'll be a little provocative, and I hope you will also join me in this conversation. So, HR's new role, are they up for the challenge? We know that there are lots of challenges in our role and in our businesses today, but lots of organizations continue to struggle. Lots of HR organizations, as well as HR professionals, continue to struggle with how do we navigate this change and what do we do about it? How do we navigate it ourselves? And how do we help our teams navigate it? All of these are lots of different questions that we need to think more about, and so we'll talk more about that today. And that's what we will learn from the insights of today's webcast. Those of you that are earning credits, you can see we have HRCI, SHRM, and CPE. You just follow directions when the box comes up in the lower right-hand corner. Okay, so let me introduce my guest because we're ready and set up for a great conversation. I'm very excited to be welcoming Danny Farron, who is Principal Global People Advisory Services Practices for Ernst & Young, and he has worked over 17 years in the HR consulting practices. He's worked with clients as they implement a variety of strategic initiatives, including HR transformation and technology implementations, HR readiness across full deal life cycles within M&As and divestitures, operating models, and business restructuring and workforce transitions. He has a lot of experience in HR. I think that would be the way to summarize. Danny has co-authored the EY Business-Led People Operating Model, the HR Transformation Methodology, Outpaced Solution Chain, Digital Delivery Tools, and led training for HRT practitioners globally. So first, let me welcome you, Danny. I'm so delighted that you've joined me today.
Yeah, thank you for giving me a chance to be a part of this today. And we get to spend the next hour talking about one of my favorite topics.
Terrific. I think it's going to be great. So thank you very much for that. So let me set up the stage, and then I'm going to bring Danny back into the conversation. Oh, wait, before I do, I'm supposed to remind you, please join us in this conversation throughout the webcast. You can type in your questions in the lower left-hand corner. You can download the presentation in the middle box there on your screen. And at the end, we do ask for a very brief evaluation. It's like 3 seconds evaluation. If you would choose your energies to complete that evaluation, we would really appreciate your feedback on that. Okay, the Global Leadership Forecast. This is a new research study that we have launched with DDI and EY with the Conference Board in 2018, as you can see on your screen. This is the largest leadership study of its kind in the world, and we talked to and interviewed and surveyed a whole lot of people. So you can see on your screen we had over 25,000 people around the world complete our survey. We had over 2,500 HR organizations, 50 countries, different generations, job functions, 26 different industries, over almost 2,500 global companies represented in this survey. So it's just all of that is to say that it was a really comprehensive survey with a lot of demographic data involved with what all of us think about leadership around the world. So what did we find? And if you're tuning into this webcast, you might already know this has been a series. There's so much data in this report that we had to break it out into 12 webcasts, and every month we've been bringing you different perspectives of this report. And so, of course, today we are focusing on the lower right-hand box there on your screen, the HR opportunity. What is HR's role going to look like, and are we up for the challenge? And let me dig into one more slide from the report, and this will set the stage, and I'll bring Danny in. So you can see we asked around HR's role in this research. A reactor, a partner, and an anticipator. And I think you can sort of guess what those words mean from an HR perspective. And you might know that we've been doing this research for quite a number of years. So last time we conducted the same study in 2014, we see the percentage of those of us that said we were reactors, partners, and anticipators. And if you also go into 2017, How does that look? So we ask in the left-hand side what HR thought, and in the right-hand side what all the leaders thought, not HR, sort of your executives out in the business. And you can see, not surprisingly, that the percentages on the right side, what leaders and business leaders thought about HR, is different than what HR thinks about HR. And for the most part, they think we're still quite a bit of reactors, right? And these are our transactional managers, right? We handle payrolls and labor relations and all those sort of transactional things. Whereas the partner boxes, you can see business leaders think we are a little bit smaller in percentage than what HR thinks. And finally, the anticipator. This is not only a business partner, but helping those business leaders think about and plan for the future from a talent perspective. And what does that look like? So you can see that the percentages, it actually has gone down in 2017 from 17% to 11%. So that begs the question from a research perspective, are we losing ground? Are we doing less from that anticipatory, high-value HR perspective? So these are all the challenges that we put forth that are presented from this research study. And let me bring Danny into the conversation to sort of walk us through, because you'll see that he's going to tell you, he's woven together a really nice story about how the HR function and roles are shifting. And so you can follow along the story as he tells it, I think, in a very interesting way. And we will also, of course, make this very helpful and action-oriented. So we will show you 8 action items of what we hope to learn from this research and from this practice, as well as what you can think about from an action orientation, right, as you go back to your job. And at the end of this webcast, we actually will have a polling question that will ask you about those 8 action items and which ones do you think might be more impactful within your own organization, because we know all organizations are different. So just to set that for you, there are 8 actions coming. Think about them. Think about which ones might be more impactful, and we'll come back and ask you. And before we start, we have a polling question. So control room, if you wouldn't mind showing the polling question to our audience. And you can just pick one in the audience, please. In order to maximize your team's ability to anticipate the emerging people's needs in the business, which of the following is most valuable? Understanding the business and work customers' experiences back. So using the customer experiences to align to our work. Number 2, improving HR capabilities to free up capacity to tackle other priorities. Number 3, fortified existing and delivering new people services. And the last one, fuel cross-functional collaboration, working across business boundaries. So I see here all of you are typing in your responses, so thank you very much. How about 3 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll, and then we'll reflect upon it. Okay, great. If you don't mind, control room, thank you. So almost 64% of you said the first one. We need to understand our business and the customer, meaning our employees' experiences, and build our work around that, right? That, of course, makes perfect sense that resonated so strongly with all of us. And the second option was around fueling cross-functional collaboration and working across business boundaries. So I don't know if you have a quick reaction to the polling results, Danny.
Well, I think it's an interesting outcome, right? Because this idea of the HR function of the future really being centered on the business and what matters from a business value chain perspective, there's never been a greater appetite for that than we are experiencing at this moment. But beyond that, it's more than just an experience. How do we actually wire the way we do work to enable us to focus on delivering experiences with efficiency and really delighting the business as a part of that process? So I think it makes sense. But honestly, HR teams are using a combination of all of the polling answers to really reposition themselves today. So we're going to spend some time really unpacking that as a team and working through what that might look like.
Perfect. So let's go back and get you started on that conversation. Is HR ready, please?
Yeah, no, I just would love to share maybe a couple of ideas. And as you think about your own organizations, your own businesses, I'm sure that many of the things on this slide are going to resonate. If you think about sort of this transformational age that we are squarely sitting in, personally, I believe there's never been a better time to be an HR professional. And as you look at the types of real people challenges that the businesses are experiencing, the employee forces and the organizational forces that lead to really a celebration of the HR capabilities that we can bring to our businesses is amazing. But it's also a little challenging, right? Because you've got all of these things happening at the same time. Unbelievable friction in terms of operating models and how operating models are going to evolve in the business. If you think about leadership capabilities and the role that leaders play, skill sets and workforce agility as people move in and out of roles and positions in a much more fluid way than maybe historically we've structured. And then when you pair that with some of the employee dynamics of focusing on meaningful work and really creating different ways of contributing beyond the role that I serve in, getting comfortable with technology as being a complement to the way we do work, are all things that are certainly a challenge for us to overcome as a team. As we go to the next page, the other thing that I think is interesting is that many HR teams have a model that looks somewhat like the image on the page. Maybe the words are slightly different, but this traditional prevalent HR model is one that really reinforces the survey outcomes or the research outcomes of, are we actually manufacturing the ability to be in an anticipatory stance? And to do that, we have to look at how our teams and how our work gets done in maybe different ways. And what you'll see on this particular page is when we work with clients and we analyze how the different pieces of work are being done and what's the nature of that work, generally speaking, 80% or so of the roles and effort are still focused on operationally getting HR work done and transactionally getting HR work. And less than 20% of the roles and or effort are focused on true strategic capabilities within HR, but also really anticipating future needs and really positioning HR to deliver new services.
So before you move on, Danny, let me ask you a question, which is, so I agree with you that this is sort of the model that many HR organizations are probably structured like, and I speak to executives that want to and understand the need to be more in that upper 20% quadrant, that we do need to be more strategic, yep. But we just can't get ourselves out of that 80% for X number of reasons. So I guess my question is twofold, is that are most HR organizations still sort of looking like this, and what's some reasons that are keeping them there, keeping them stuck in that and not able to move more into that strategic mode?
That's right. So I would say there's maybe a few things that create a little bit of tension in terms of keeping you in the current model. One would be if you don't have the fortitude to tackle process simplification, really harmonizing processes where it makes sense, looking at your technology infrastructure and making sure it really does make it easier to get HR work done, those often become sort of the forces that sort of keep you in place, or at least limit your ability to make progress. Another place where I think HR teams are really spending time is, what are the services that are valuable? What are the services that are not valuable? There's things that are required from a regulatory perspective, but there's also a whole realm of services that just might be different than the way HR has historically served the organization. How do you rationalize that portfolio of things that HR could contribute to, given the model that you've got?
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I think, and I know we're going to dig a lot more into this. So in fact, thank you to the audience. You are already starting to type in some questions, but one of them is, do you see real benefits in the creation of this new operating model within HR? So I'm going to actually hold off on that question because I think we're going to spend the next hour talking about it.
That's right.
And I do hope those benefits come out. How are risk mitigations addressed within the COE models? Is there a tendency for them to become more transactional and siloed? I defer to you, Danny, but I'm also thinking that might be addressed also in the conversations up ahead.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's do a quick answer now. And then as we unpack the sort of future model, we're going to hit each of these topics in a bit more detail.
Yep.
So what I would say is in the COE space, that is a place where HR professionals have really worked hard to think about services and programs that make sense for the organization. And they've built a tremendous amount of personal reputation and brand around the programs they've designed. And what's happening more and more today is HR teams are really listening to the employees and managers and leaders that they serve, taking that feedback into the design of their programs and adjusting what the work is. Where I think HR teams are going is saying, if I look at my specialist, there's certain things I'm asking my best compensation people, my best benefits people to do that are operational in nature. How do we release them of that day-to-day running the comp salary process, for example? Trust that to another part of my HR service delivery model so that my specialists can work on other parts of contributing in that space.
Okay, why don't we keep going?
All right, perfect. So as we go to the next role, one of the things we did want to spend a little bit of time on is this idea of how you excel and differentiate. So this idea of settling into that anticipator's sort of mindset. A few of the points in here I think really underscore the rest of the presentation. This idea of starting in the bottom right corner, how do you use a whole range of smart technologies to make the process of getting HR work done more efficient, more effective, bring a delivery experience that's exceptional? There is tremendous capability that's available to HR teams today, and it's often sort of a liberator of the HR function to really look at technology with a different mindset and really trusting technology to do work that historically maybe haven't been available to us, at least in sort of a consumer grade level. Another concept is this idea of analytics and the role of people analytics playing. And so if you think about every part of the HR model, bringing good insights into that equation, there's more data than we've ever had. But how do you go from data to really predicting what it means for your business and shifting conversations from reacting to the data that's in front of you to anticipating what are the challenges down the road 6 months or 18 months from now, and how do you get in front of those challenges before they become issues? And then the second point from the bottom on the right is just this idea of where do I look at my talent? In a world where skills are incredibly valued and skills become maybe the new unit of measure for HR, really tapping into the business and where I've got capabilities in the business to fix particular people issues and looking at business unit participants coming through that HR function as a part of their rotations makes a ton of sense. So as we go to the next page, what you're going to see is a few practical actions that HR teams are taking. And the first one is manufacturing capacity. And I use that term intentionally. If you think about data, digital, all the forms of intelligent automation, they now are at a place where as HR professionals, we can get more done by leveraging our technology than we've ever been able to do before. And when we work with clients, that can be as much as 40% of the effort that HR teams are spending today. And so if you're a 1,000-person HR team, that's 400 FTEs. If you're a 500-person HR team, that's another 40 FTEs in that process. And so it really does become exciting to think about how do I take control of my environment and use technology to help. And there's three things they do. They look at how they maximize their use of the cloud, and they pair it with intelligent automation where it makes sense. And then the final piece is they really look at direct digital access, this idea of how people interact with HR services, really changing how people consume basic HR work. And so what I'd like to do is take each one of those actions and break it down a little bit further. This page now just shows really where we see organizations spending their time. And we have teams that are working on both sides of this page at the same time. They're looking at their cloud, their current HCM solution and saying, how do we get the most out of a Workday or SuccessFactors or whatever my core solution may be? At the same time, really maximizing the capability, challenging what we're asking employees and managers to do as a part of that process, and really scrutinizing what we're asking HR professionals to do. How can we simplify the delivery of work within our core solutions? At the same time, they're saying for everything we can't do in the cloud, let's make sure that we're looking at other forms of technology to help us get work done. And so they're looking at chatbots with true artificial intelligence that are anticipating common questions or common issues and feeding back answers directly to those that may have an issue. So before it ever becomes a ticket in the solutions center, you've got an interaction that helps people get to an answer before it ever becomes a problem.
So can I dig deeper a little bit?
Because, of course.
I'm sure our audience would be interested in just, so how are they, I'm sure you're working with clients to do this, so what are they using the cloud integration to actually do, or the intelligent automation of chat box? What are they actually doing with that chat box? Can you give us an example?
Yeah.
Just a little bit more tangible for the audiences that are thinking through some of their own problems?
Yeah, so one example might be, and I've got a client right now that is using Workday as their primary solution, But they had several other platforms around the world to do talent acquisition, to do a number of other capabilities. And they're working through, how do I bring more of that into my core HCM? And so they're moving to Workday Learning, for example. They're going to move to Workday Recruitment from a hiring perspective. So they're bringing more of the HR work into a single platform as being one example. Another example on that side is they're looking at doing sort of audits or assessments of their Workday health. And they're really looking at, how do I improve the configuration of my business processes? How do I look at my security roles and permissions so that I have less approval steps and less confusion in the way we get HR work done? So that's the left side of the page. A couple examples on the right side of the page. I'm working with a technology company based in the Southeast, and they are looking at a different variety of automation. And so as their organization has really embraced automation across many functional areas, HR set out from the beginning to be a leader in that space. So of the first 12 robots that were put into production, 5 were HR automation capabilities. And they were everything from basic servicing. So they had a solution center that would take questions, and they actually built a robot to handle all of the basic questions they would get in their solution center. And so think of all the email responses, all the chat responses. They now have got that capability wired in from an automation perspective. Another example is they're looking at all of the work that they do to match off files to get ready for vendor processing and all the manual data corrections and analysis that would happen there. They've got another bot that does all the preparation of pension files and health files. So as they send everything out to the vendors, the people that used to be in those specialist areas of HR no longer have to do that work from soup to nuts, but instead verify what the automation has done for them.
It's lots of potential with the different automations that we can use, and especially around all the data. I mean, frankly, outside of HR, of course, but also within HR, there's lots of potential to take a huge amount of data and do something quickly that, frankly, humans can't do as well. You know, we can't do a lot of these data processing things as well across volume and across speed, you know, that machines can do.
That's right.
And so using that to help. So we have a couple, before you go on, we have a couple of quick questions. And actually, they all sort of center around one theme as I see it. What is your thought on requiring business experiences for senior HR leaders to reinforce the need for business focus? And it's sort of related, how does the talent competencies need to change in HR as businesses move, right? How do we move from so I think there's even one more question, which is again around the same thing. What does this mean to me as the HR professional? Now, I know you might get to a little bit of that. I wonder also if you have some thoughts to share, because especially even around this, you know, action one, which is around the automation. You know, what does that look like for all of us in HR?
Yeah, so I would say maybe there's a few things there, and I'm sure that all the folks that have joined this conference are thinking through some level of this with their organizations today. So working sort of business back and really focusing on understanding the value chains in the business is an area where historically a business partner was generally selected for having tremendous capability in the HR domain and were trusted to sort of learn enough about the business. And what we're seeing is they're kind of flipping the priority to say, really understanding the business is maybe the premium skill set over time, and then being able to apply all of that great HR and people capability to a diverse set of business problems. And so they really are looking at, how do we structure the role of a business partner differently? What are the types of services that we're asking business partners to deliver? More importantly, what are some of the things we're taking off of our business partners' plates? A couple classic examples might be the role they play in employee relations, the role they play in the hiring process. Those tend to be big time sucks in terms of distracting business partners from other things. And they're saying, you know what, how do we redefine how we do that work so it's less of a drag on our business partners, so that our business partners really do have more time to do things like strategic workforce planning and driving culture and experience and diversity and inclusion imperatives locally with their leadership teams. But to do that, you have to invest in those team members. So this idea of capabilities, there's no better function in the world at creating new capability than an HR team. And so if you think about what we're doing with learning and development, we have to apply that to ourselves. We can't just do that for the business, but we have to position our professionals to really contribute in different ways. We also have to unlock pockets of talents that maybe have been sitting in a role where they've got this great experience that they never asked to use, or a great skill set that their current role doesn't require them to use. How do we uncover where that capability is, match people up against experience to demonstrate that opportunity as a part of this work?
And I mean, based on what you're saying, there's even a strong implication of maybe future HR business partners are going to be sourced not from the traditional sources that we think of, just sort of your classic HR professional, right? Maybe they need to come from the business.
Absolutely.
Right? And so different places to source, where do you find to build or find those capabilities with the stronger set of the business acumen part that you were just emphasizing?
That's right. And we're going to come back to that when we get to the breakdown of the model. But I think it's a great set of questions because all through this, there is intentional skill development, intentional service development, and those two things require HR to really equip their professionals to not just stand up a program and hope it goes, but actually think product lifecycle. How do I get new services introduced and embedded in the way the business does work? That's more than standing up the program. That's taking it to stabilization of that particular service area.
Yeah. So you know what? Let me turn it back to you, just in the interest of moving time.
No problem. So what we did in action number 2, and I just apologize for everybody that's looking at this on screen. It is very small. You're able to download these materials and kind of look at it in more detail for sure. But what we did is we took the typical sub-process areas of HR. Think of this as being sort of a periodic table of HR elements, and said, where do we see with clients a tremendous amount of automation happening in all of its form? From artificial intelligence to analytics to machine learning, so on and so forth. And one thing that I would note on this page, there's only one icon that appears in every single cell, and that's analytics. So when we look at some of the findings from the research that says, get your data house in order, really make sure your analytic capabilities are right, we could not wholeheartedly endorse that more. Analytics is an impact driver that elevate the contribution of every functional area of HR, and enabling that team in the right way then allows your business partners to spend less time creating their reports and cleaning up data and getting to a place where they can tell a story, to really preparing for the right leadership conversation, bringing the right people insights into that equation. So absolutely, analytics is a piece of it. As you look down columns, you'll see, okay, these are areas where there's a tremendous amount of automation. Many clients will say, where do I have a bunch of my FTEs today? And so if I've got a client who's got 117.2 people doing talent acquisition, and it's one of the areas where there's a tremendous amount of automation capability, are we leaning into technology in the right ways? Can we reposition our talent acquisition team to be more effective by brokering some of the work between a digital workforce and our traditional workforce? As we move to the next page, this just really sort of brings to life really where I see significant pressure from the employee workforce in terms of how they want to consume HR services. If I go back 5 years ago, just having a good portal was sufficient, and people were willing to spend time searching for key findings and looking for the information that they wanted to find. Today, people have zero patience for that. They want to literally talk to their phone or talk to their screen and say, I'm looking for this very specific piece of data, play it back to me. And so this idea of really using all screens, whether it becomes your smartphones, whether it becomes your desktop, whether it becomes iPads, and making it so people can very quickly get to the types of information they need and be able to do work from an HR perspective from anywhere. So this idea of work-life integration and enabling people to connect at their time and their scale in a format that they want is really important in the process.
So let me ask around this, because we obviously see a lot of apps in the world, but can you think of maybe 1 or 2 examples of some HR organizations doing something really kind of cool or different or interesting in this digital access space?
Yeah, so one example I would share is we've got a client that is using chat to really replace its traditional solution center. And so instead of having the traditional solution center where people would send in an email ticket, call in, and get support, they're cutting off almost all of the volume using chatbots as being that interface. And those chatbots not only can handle questions and respond back with answers, but they initiate workflows. They connect into the actual core HCM solution. And so what a normal agent might have done from the solution center historically, they're now configuring technology to do that work in front of them. One organization that I know of has removed all of their traditional solution centers, so there is no option to just call or email in your question and get work done. Instead, they're really leveraging technology to take that activity out of the equation and they've repositioned a new kind of people services and solutions group that picks up wherever the core solution center would have left off.
And you're saying it's also activating work streams. So if I had problems with my payroll, it would click me directly to where I need to go to not only get the answer, but to fix the problem.
That's right.
Of my payroll.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And obviously having that automation helps, as well as take away all the transactional stuff that used historically and still do take lots of people to manage.
That's right.
So it's just a new world order of what the 1-800 HR service represents to all of us. But please keep going.
Yes. So as we sort of continue down this journey, right? If we accept that digital data and technology are changing the way we can do HR work, then what it means is the rest of the service delivery model for HR has a choice. It can play up or it can play differently, but it's got to do one of the two. And so in this, what we've shown is here's how that traditional operations area of HR evolves. And it evolves intentionally into boundaries historically occupied by field HR, business partners, and the COEs. And I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. If you assume technology is taking care of some of the bottom part of this, then it means there's capacity within that organization to do different kinds of work from the solution area. So for example, they may take on generalist work that may still sit with business partners, or generalist work that may sit with field HR. And so that comes into this people solutions and services area, kind of representing that part of it. In the COE space, specialist activities, specifically those things around managing and running sort of annual or event-driven things, come into the people services and solutions areas, again, creating capacity for each of these teams to focus in other areas and make different contributions to the organizations that they support. So let me just unpack that again. So if you think about specialist work, this is just an example of a few examples: compensation, benefits, core HR, talent acquisition, talent management, and the types of things HR leaders are challenging themselves to say, how do I bring more of these activities into people services and solutions so I can unencumber my specialists to focus on different priorities in the business? These are a few examples, but there are many others in that space. Another thing that I would love to sort of focus on is this idea of generalist work. And depending on how your organization is set up, the geographies you work in, some degree of local contact, specifically in some countries, is going to be a must-have. But how do you really make the most of getting work done locally? And what we find is taking that generalist work and really collapsing it into your people solutions and services area means that you move from HR generalists to really unencumbered people strategists tomorrow, business partners tomorrow. So many business partners today have the ability to do all of the transacting work within their core HCM solution. Some clients have said no, they can't initiate any transactions. Others examples is the time spending writing job descriptions and reviewing position posting requirements and make sure everything is sort of specced up. That all is now sliding into people services and solutions. So the business partners or that field HR team is focused on, how do we have the right talent conversations? Are we really needing to hire somebody externally? Can we locate talent within our own organization that might fill this need? Those just become examples of when you shift that generalist work and activity off the plates of these individuals, now there's space to do different things with their time.
So let me reflect back for just a quick second around all of this, because we have historically looked at sort of extracting transactions into sort of center of excellences and things like that. But you're sort of thinking about, version 2, if you will, the next version, where it's not around just a core group of people, but it's intentional removal of, well, I shouldn't say intentional shifting of core activities that belonged to what we call today in different groups, whether it's business partners or local HR generalists or centers of excellence, and shifting those very specifically and intentionally into a separate core, what you're calling people support services or people services group. So, and just going through that exercise is a challenge in itself, right? Because how do you figure out what are the right things to do to bring it forth and to reconnect? And but let me just stop there, because as you build a story, I think the audience will see that you really continue the storyline around how the structure of HR really shifts, and in a very dramatic way, but in a very intriguing way that I think will help all of us in the future.
And you hit on a really important theme, and this idea of practical muscle movements, ways we deliver HR work that is fully within the empowerment of HR leaders and teams to deal with themselves. They don't have to ask permission to do any of this work. They just have to spend the time to say, I'm going to broaden my definition of what's possible. And then in that broader definition of what's possible, I'm going to go through process area by process area and say, these are great candidates for sliding in. These are things for whatever business reason, we need to keep the way we do them today. But intentionally going through that process, you'll find a tremendous amount of work that can be moved into this new capability. And what I would caution teams to do is not think of this as sort of the operational area of HR. Think of it as steady state business as usual. All the basic things we need to get done, some of those are operational in nature, some of those are transactional in nature. The more we can trust this group to do steady state, the more capacity we have to do non-steady state activities. And that's all, I think, some of the exciting areas where we see HR teams really investing today.
Please, go ahead.
So now we sort of continue to build this model, this idea of people consultants, and think of this as being the next evolution of your COEs and your communities of practice. These really become true people skill consultants. And so what's fascinating is the type of business challenges are multidimensional. And they have so many aspects that are very germane to the domain and expertise of HR. And so what HR teams are doing is they're saying, how do I manufacture more space for my teams to really serve as consultants to the business and not do it as their second job, their third job, they're from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the end of my normal day job, but making it be their core job. So I'll share an example. We've got one client out on the West Coast, high-tech firm, that is really challenging her structure. And what she's doing as a people leadership team is they're saying, I want all of my specialists to be organized in agile scrum teams. And I want them to line up against business imperatives that matter and bring really amazing people capabilities to those imperatives. So they're really working as sort of horizontal contributors versus the traditional view of sort of sitting in a COE and sort of structuring the process that way. The other thing that they're doing is they're shifting from a process ownership mindset to a product ownership mindset. And with product ownership, you really do have to think employee experience and value to the business back. If the business was going to buy this product from the function of HR, is it valuable enough for the resources to be committed against it? And so this idea of a product life cycle where you introduce new programs, listen to those that you serve, involve, innovate, and really invest in improving those capabilities real time with your business requires a very different way of processing feedback, making adjustments to the way work gets done, rolling it out, and then starting that product cycle again. And so those become a really exciting way to work.
So those teams become true consulting teams, and they're not static. They evolve depending on the need and the business imperative, and you just sort of move HR teams in and out as necessary.
That's right. Around the imperatives that matter in the business. Maybe it's in a business unit, maybe it's at the global organization level, but what you get is a variety of experiences, and it really is broader than the function of HR. These communities of practice should stretch across functional boundaries and bring great finance expertise and supply chain expertise and technology expertise into the same problem-solving mode. And there's no better team to lead by example in terms of the way it conducts its business than HR, but also equip and fuel the ability of other teams to collaborate that way. It's a great space to be in.
Great.
So just two items here that I want to just highlight as just examples of where HR teams are making some choices. So they're taking things that have historically been held very close to the vest, take employee relations as an example of that, and saying, if we are going to really move work in a different fashion, can I trust my people consulting teams to be employee relations consultants and just do as their primary job supporting the employee relations issues that may arise in our business and doing all the things from preparing for performance improvement plans and handling disciplinary actions so that my business partners aren't sucked into that swirl, but instead I've got tremendous expertise in a highly sensitive area of HR and I'm delivering it in a virtual environment as a part of this process. So that's one example, and there's many others where we're taking that sort of really what I would say is work that HR has sort of clutched onto historically and said we only can do this from a very specialized place, and saying, yep, we can do that, but we can actually do it in a different way. The next page is, I think, a really interesting one. And what we tried to do on this page is match some of the outputs from the leadership forecast, saying here's the types of things that anticipators are doing far more effectively, and match it with where we see HR teams really investing in new services and new capability areas. Sometimes these were already in place for an organization, so they're just galvanizing the effectiveness of it. But this idea of strategic workforce planning and mobile talent experience, looking at that talent horizontal to make sure that really we're thinking about it in the right terms, connecting that to culture and strategy, and everything we're doing from a diversity and inclusion perspective, all the things that we see around employee experience, employee engagement, and really driving a productive workforce. Stretching into collaboration and teaming, how do we really foster an environment where people are great at working in cross-functional teams and delivering amazing results for the business units they support? And then as we continue around the sort of left side of the page, people analytics and technology, really getting the technical capability of HR to elevate so that you can really elevate the impact of services. But then tremendous investments in org design, org development as organizations change, having that capability really locked down. And then everything we're doing with employee development and digital leadership as we prepare not only HR professionals to show up and work in different ways, but upskill the same capabilities in finance, supply chain, IT, and all the other parts of the business that are going through the same transformative age.
So can I jump in? Because I think this slide also leads to a couple of questions that are coming in. Acting as product owners, which are in your people consultant group that you just brought out. And if you look around the bubbles, it's around a team. So the people consultants or the team of people consultants could have specialists in any of these areas, or maybe multiple of these areas. But it actually doesn't matter because you're bringing forth the right skills to support the specific business need.
That's right.
And you might use every one of these bubbles around the circle, or you might just use 3 of these bubbles around the circle. As long as it connects directly to that business need, you're bringing in the skills and the competencies that you need to support that business. So I think some of the audience are asking more clarification around what is this people consultant, how does this team? So I think we struggle with this because it's pretty different than how we do things today. You don't actually have a specific role as the comp specialist. I mean, you might have a lot of comp expertise and people will know that, but your title may not be the comp specialist. But you're brought into teams all the time to look at comp issues, or maybe it's talent acquisition issues, or maybe it's performance management issues, whatever that is. And just another 30 seconds around sort of clarification around this people consultant team.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And so a couple of things in response to the questions. One is, don't think that we're abandoning everything that COEs have historically done. That is not intended or true, right? There is still a need to look at proper program design, how you're going to structure the delivery of compensation programs in that example. That work still continues. But when you look at, in a FTE basis, how much time is spent on doing the strategic side of those programs, maybe it's 1 FTE, maybe it's 2 FTEs that really spend the bulk of their time doing that. The rest of the comp administration team, as an example, are doing other things. And so it's that place where now the skill set of compensation, rewards capability, and tying that to org development and outcomes becomes super valuable. And so instead of giving people a generalist role where they have lots of comp activities they contribute to, they're just separating it and saying, we've got a couple of folks that are going to be true product owners and be strategists around the way we do this kind of work for the business. And there's going to be the rest of our team that's available to serve in different ways from a teaming perspective.
And to think about HR people that will basically move in and out of teams as necessary.
That's right.
Right? You may have different leaders, different bosses, if you will, right? And so again, that's different from how we think of our roles and how do we bring forth, I kind of connect that to like medical teams. Right? When you have a patient with a lot of complex issues, they bring all the doctors together because they all have different specialties.
That's right.
And the doctors work together for this one patient, but they might disperse and never work together again for any other patient. And so how do we lightly connect that analogy to an HR role specifically for a business function or business need? We bring together the team of specialists and we just disband when it's done, or we bring it back together in different people and different needs.
And it's in some cases, many organizations are operating that way today. They've got a business partner that says, here's my challenge. My business unit leader is asking us to do this thing. I definitely got to have Sally from compensation because she's amazing in that space. I need John from our technology team. And so we're doing it informally around initiatives. All we're doing is formalizing it and saying, as a way of working, as someone's core contribution is going to be centered around sort of consulting style work and really supporting the businesses that they have. They still have to be amazing technicians to be able to add value in that process.
But in today, for poor Sally and John, it's probably their part-time job,
Yes.
right? And they have a full-time job that they'll still support.
That's
and we're
exactly
just
right.
shifting that to make it their full-time job.
That's right.
I think that's great. Oh, just in the interest of time, let's keep going.
Yeah, please. So again, just 30 seconds on people analytics. This is one of the most important areas that many HR teams are really investing in today. And it really does, the guidance on this page is really right. Getting that data house in order, understanding where your sources of truth are from a data perspective, and not just thinking about cool dashboards, but really thinking about what are the types of insights that matter to the business. How can I look into the future and use data to construct a narrative that actually matches where we might be 6 months from now or 18 months from now? This is a place where many organizations are really spending time today in that space. So just to round out the rest of the sort of boxes in picture, as I want to cover this quickly. So if you sort of continue the story, now your business partners sort of evolved into these true people strategists. And they really focus on the strategic side of serving the business. And what's different in this equation is they really center on the business value chains and what are the people points of vulnerability in those value chains. And then they assemble the right consultants to work with them on problems or issues for the business. And so instead of being an expert at all of the above and really sort of challenging the way you work, this is more, I'm going to be an expert in what drives value for the business, and I'm going to bring amazing partners and contributors from my people organization to solve your business needs as a part of that process. The example here is just, and this is just one example, but similar to what business partners do today, right? You have a situation in which the business is going to expand into 14 new countries. And in order to do that, there's many capability areas of HR that should help really position that business for success. Thinking about culture and bringing two teams together, and how do you get that to really come together from the beginning of this acquisition. Performance and rewards, looking at how you incent behaviors and what the flow through is going to look like. Mobile talent, as you move people in and out of geographies to support new areas, how do you create an experience as people go and serve new jurisdictions in that space? People development, how do you upskill folks to work in new countries and understand norms and capabilities that really happen in that space? How do you help them really understand combined platforms of services and products, all the things that would go with that? And then how do you foster high performance teaming? So this is not uncommon to what business partners do today, but what we're saying is if you center on the business issue and you bring amazing HR professionals to work side by side with you in this space, you're going to end up with really specialized answers for the business. So the last piece is really what happens with field HR. And to be completely honest, we see organizations sort of land in one of two spots. Depending on how geographically distributed their business is, they will say, there's some things that I just need to have some local HR support for. And if so, what's a good use of their time? Others may say, I actually could envision a world where there's no local HR support. Between what we can do with technology and what we can do with our core tech solutions, I can envision not having local HR and really investing in other ways. So we see them sort of landing in two spots. For the people that choose to use local HR, they really see them as people activators, folks that really drive the engagement experience. They drive program execution locally to make sure things are being adopted well. They really are just local change agents to drive sort of the effectiveness of different imperatives and different people programs at the business level, and they activate. They don't just roll out a program, they make sure the program becomes part of business as usual at a local level.
And I like your change agent description of this role versus, the local HR generalist that basically handles everything.
Yes.
That nobody else wants to deal with and nobody knows and cares, and they just have to do all of it. Whereas a lot of those transactional, especially those activities, can be shifted.
That's right.
But again, we don't think too much about that. And how do we intentionally do that?
Yeah. But this idea of staying intentionally in the horizontal requires some local presence.
Of course.
And to do that effectively, thinking about how you reposition that field HR team to show up in a very different way in supporting the business. So they're not just working through the labyrinth of HR processes and transactions, but instead really galvanizing the adoption of programs and services locally. And they're also two-way traffic, right? They're great receivers of feedback, ideas. How do you improve processes and service delivery? So using them as that feedback loop to fuel that product life cycle is critical in the process.
Yep.
So last page, and this is sort of where it all comes around, where the circle goes round, is when organizations go through this intentional process, what they do is they manufacture a ton of capacity, and they shift how much of their team is able to focus on business as usual versus the other things that emerging people needs in the business. And something in the range of 50-50 is about right. Where imagine being able to do all your business HR activities today with 50% of the team you have today, and then using the capacity you've created to center on those things that matter for your business. And I use those words intentionally because what will matter in one company will be very different than what matters in another company, but having the ability to manufacture your own capacity and to focus that capacity in what matters to your business is very liberating from an HR professional perspective. So you don't have to ask for permission to do this work, but instead position your organization to serve in new ways, but being very attuned to the business needs and the people needs in your business.
So let me ask a quick question before we go to our final polling question. For the audience, if you remember, I'm going to come back and ask you about those actions that Danny had walked us through. But so I think looking at the model and shifting, from the 50% to the 50%, all of that makes great sense. And often I've had conversations with executives that struggle with sort of how we do this, right? And we talked a little bit about this is an idea and a proposal of how we can work more actively to shift to get to that. Of course, it's very difficult to do, and it's not at all easy, but actively working towards that will help us get to the 50-50 because we've been struggling for quite a while around this. How do we be less transactional and more strategic conversation? Mm-hmm. And this is just a way to advance that conversation and actually give us some specifics to think about and what we actually do and how to make it happen. So a question from the audience around this, which is, this is, it's different, but it's not too different, but actually it is also very different at the same time.
Sure.
For HR. What does this imply from a culture change for HR? Can you talk a little bit about that, and how does that look like? What does it mean? Are there struggles? Are there pains and tears? What is that?
Yeah, there's a few things, right? And so this idea of trust is really important for HR to lead by example. If you can trust your teammates to do employee relations work and do it incredibly well, then you can make a whole bunch of muscle movement choices in terms of how work gets done. But oftentimes HR teams get stuck at trust, and they believe that if they don't have control of that activity, they're not ready to trust another team to do that work for them. So one place where people get stuck is trust. Another place where organizations get stuck is this idea of neglecting the investment in themselves. And I think even the research showed that HR teams weren't investing at the same rate in their own team's development. And I think part of it is because they're honestly spending so much time serving others, and they have a server's nature that they tend to sort of look at themselves last in that equation. But in order to make this muscle movement happen, you have to invest in capabilities. This idea of upskilling is critically important in this process. Otherwise, behaviors will eat this model for breakfast, and people will slide right back into what they've always done. That field HR person settles right back into doing HR work locally just because they're comfortable and confident in doing that work. And so how you really look at capability and reinforcing behaviors towards the new model is important. The last thing I would say in this space is don't give it all back. What I think one mistake HR teams make is they'll put together a business case around automation, and they'll give 100% of the savings back to the business. Don't do that. Take 50% of the savings for yourself and say, you know what, if we're going to manufacture 10 FTEs of capacity, I'm going to give 5 FTE back because that maybe pays for my program and sort of delivers the right kind of outcome from a business perspective. But I'm going to keep 5, and I'm going to reinvest those 5 FTEs in an analytics person, an org design person, and whatever in that process, so that as you're making those muscle movements, you're intentionally reinvesting some of those savings back into galvanizing your way of delivering work.
Okay, great, great. So let's just move to the final polling question for the audience. And if you could, control room, which of the following actions will make the biggest impact on your ability to anticipate and solve emerging people needs for your organization? And I realize it's a longer list, and Danny went through each and every one of them. So just think about it. Take a moment to read each one and think about, like, where do you think your organization should prioritize, or that which actions perhaps could have a greater value. So I'll just give you another couple of seconds around that. And Danny, I have to tell you, I'm just sort of flowing through all the different questions from the audience. So
it seems like it's moving.
It's moving. So thank you again to the audience for joining us in this conversation. We greatly appreciate that, and it makes it just more interesting for everybody. So I'm just trying to figure out if there is a question that I skipped over too quickly. And thank you also for the audience for sharing and learning from each other, even on our webcast here, for what RPA stands for. So thanks for that. Okay, and if we could, let's jump back into the survey question. And let's just, control room, if you don't mind closing the survey. Okay, and you can see that action 2, automation enables HR work across the employee life cycle. It's at about 27.5%. That's the largest component that we see from our list. And the next one, the number one is action 7, act as product owners to fortify existing and introduce new services. So I believe your model around people consultants perhaps resonates to a lot of people. That's the 35% is the action 7 around that, and the second one is the automation, both of which came across really strongly as, I think, HR people realizing and understanding that if we really want to get and become more strategic, we need to take on those two things, right?
Yes.
Without those two things, it's just not going to get there.
It's two sides of the same coin, actually, because what many HR teams will do is they'll manufacture the capacity and then reinvest that capacity. And the way they do that is tackling automation and then taking a portion of those savings and saying, where will we want to galvanize the capabilities that we have? And sometimes that is investing in headcount, sometimes it's investing in capability or technology, but it really is building up industrial grade products that the business looks at and says, this is amazing for us. Not only is it great in concept, but I can see it really driving value for our business, and that just fuels more demand for that kind of work.
Yeah, no, great. And really, we have just a couple of more minutes. If I could ask you to go through your final thoughts. We have 2 slides on sort of some summary thoughts around this, and if you could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think thought 1, and this goes back to the 2 sides of the coin, right? So really looking at technology as being an asset, seeing it as being a complement to your team, this idea of being truly digital workers that work alongside your HR team is one area where I think many teams are really taking a very careful look at the moment. And then the second side of it is to say, okay, if you do that, then where am I going to reinvest? And this idea of looking at their COEs, looking at their generalist work, and doing some of that muscle movement activity to intentionally create some capacity and more importantly, reduce the strain on some of those very stretched resources. Is a place where many HR teams are really spending time. And a tried and true item, which we've been working at for many years, is just business back and really understanding what drives outcomes, impact, top line, bottom line, everything in between those 2 wickets for the business is where we will have the biggest difference we make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's critical around the automation and even just intelligent automation. You introduce an RPA, by the way. About a year ago, I had to Google that acronym just to make sure I got it right as well, which may not be the acronyms that we're used to in HR, but welcome to the world of artificial intelligence. And I've been doing some research around this for the past year, and so it's been a great adventure. But this is part of that shift, right? That's just one small example of how all of us in HR needs to continue that shifting, ourselves as well as within our teams and in our organizations. And it might be new acronyms, new learning, new mindsets, whatever that is, but how do we shift that into helping ourselves and our HR colleagues as well as our organization look forward to the future? So just unfortunately, we're just out of time, but I wanted to summarize by inviting all our audience to next month's Global Leadership Forecast, where The topic is meeting the needs of the modern learner. Another challenge, this is for ourselves as well as for our employees that we support. And we have Mary Wolf from EY joining us along with our own Rebecca Ray. Those of you that are listening in, if you'd like to attend our conference this fall, the Future Ready Organization. This is more broadly for the organization, but certainly there's a strong HR component in this conversation. And so please join us for that if you want to visit New York in October. So that's always fun. So Danny, I just wanted to come back to say thank you so much. I think the conversation continues. Obviously, we've been on this journey. The journey continues, but it continues to shift. And I would almost even dare to venture that it's shifting a little bit more in a way that helps us. All right, that the pivotal point, that maybe we're hitting some pivotal points around how HR can transform and how we can help ourselves and our teams get there in some really interesting ways. And lots of conversations and questions always around org structures. So thank you for presenting this in a holistic and thoughtful manner to help us think through that.
My pleasure. Thank you for the time today.
Yeah. And to our audience, thank you again for joining us. I hope you found this conversation interesting. Please complete our evaluation at the end. I'm Amy Abel and with the Conference Board. Thanks again.